Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our traditional PD webinar series. Today's session is entitled Supporting Students Through the Appeals Process. My name is Tommy Samanik. I'm one of the professional development specialists here with the Illinois Student Assistance Commission. Just go over a couple of housekeeping items before we go ahead and kick things off. This session is being recorded and it will be available on our PD website there, isaac.org/PD on-demand webinars in about 1 to 2 weeks. So you can go ahead and visit it later via that page. And if for whatever reason, if you or any of your colleagues on the line are having trouble connecting through audio, you can always dial in using the call me option. Bottom right hand corner of your screen, it gives you a phone number. And if you dial that phone number on your phone, you can get audio then through your phone if for whatever reason your computer is having issues. I do have colleagues on the line available to ask questions or answer questions, I should say, throughout the webinar. Please use the Q&A feature. Bottom right-hand corner of your screen, it'll say Q&A with a little question mark. You can go ahead and click on that, ask your questions live, and someone will definitely answer it for you. We also have a variety of other webinars and offerings that we have been doing virtually here. We have that available on our upcoming offerings page at our isaac.org PD spot. You can go ahead and check out any sort of offerings that we have. And continuing education credits as well as professional development hours will be offered after today's session here. So stick around. We'll open up the chat and drop in that survey link for you all to take the survey. We like to have this slide in here in case there's folks joining us who maybe not have heard of the agency before. At ISAC, our mission is to provide Illinois students with information and assistance to help make education, whatever that might be, beyond high school accessible and affordable. We also administer a wide variety of scholarships and grants to our students across the state, whether that be a veterans grant, a teaching scholarship, tuition waivers, a wide variety of scholarships and grants we now administer. I feel like we gain a couple every year. So what we offer and administer has definitely expanded in recent years. And then myself and some of the colleagues on my line here in the training team, we provide professional development offerings of a wide variety, including sessions about navigating the financial aid process, resources and support for our underrepresented student populations, as well as sessions on the student loan repayment process, different forgiveness options, etc. So lots of things that we offer virtually and in person. So here is our agenda for today. I'm actually going to talk about professional judgment a little bit first, and then I'm going to dive right in through the appeals process. That's really what we're going to focus on today. Then I'll go through just some general resources for us all to be aware of. So I kind of wanted to start here and kind of hit the nail on the head early before we start talking about some of the content regarding all sort of the issues with the new FAFSA that was rolled out for the 24-25 award year has caused a variety of processing delays. And it's kind of steamrolled and barricaded onto a lot of other sort of topics and issues as we've approached, the summer and the end of the school year, and students trying to make informed decisions about where they want to go after high school, right? So we know the FAFSA was delayed, right? It did not open October 1st. It opened up towards the new year. December 31st was sort of their soft launch. And there were a wide variety of issues in completing the application, causing many of the students we work with in our communities to not be able to actually complete the application in its entirety for a variety of reasons. Well, of course, because of that, ISERs were being delayed, right? Institutions were not receiving those student information records. FAFSAs were not getting processed. That is up to scale now, but that was, of course, delayed by a variety of months. Now the correction process, we're here sort of in the current day, is open now to students. They can submit corrections to their FAFSAs, but we're now hearing some additional issues in the correction process. Like, for example, the direct data exchange is not correctly transferring some portions of tax information onto the application. Again, providing more issues for corrections. So this is, of course, delaying financial aid offers. Our next bubble you see on the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. And students need a financial aid offers. They need proper ISERs from school so then they can go ahead and package aid and send the right offer letters to the students so they have time to make an informed decision, right? This is going to delay then the appeals process as well as professional judgment in which we're talking about today, right? Because in order to probably make an appeal or request professional judgment in the first place, they got to get an offer letter to say, all right, is this aid actually going to work for me, or do I need to make an appeal, or something got to get fixed, etc. So know that that's going to be delayed as well, and of course leads up to decision day for students. A lot of institutions have delayed their decision days from, say, May 1 to maybe June 1. NACAC has a great sort of list of all the institutions who have officially done that, but I've talked to institutions who maybe haven't officially moved a date, but have just said, we'll turn every stone that we can to help our students here. No sort of official like national college decision day for them on their end here. So I've been hearing institutions have been flexible. So hopefully things can get going soon where students can get aid offers, make any sort of appeals, get any sort of professional judgment cases figured out later this spring, and then can make their decisions here pretty much hopefully end of spring, early summer, God willing. So just want to kind of show you about all the sort of barrel rolling and all the processing delays. And this, of course, affects the topic that we're talking about today. Okay, I want to just hit on a couple of points about professional judgment because it is relevant for the appeals process. So professional judgment is the authority of a school's financial aid administrator to adjust and override dependency status or any other special circumstance based upon adequate documentation, right? So these special and now unusual circumstances are sort of the two categories that they've now carved out, and I will define those on the next couple slides here. But this allows the administrators to adjust either elements in the cost of attendance, the SCI calculation, or of course dependency status. And they're going to need adequate documentation in order to justify making any kind of adjustment for students. So these are done on a case-by-case basis. This is all done individual, one by one, just because one student was granted a professional judgment case for maybe the same reason another student is requesting doesn't necessarily mean that that same student is going to get granted that request, right? It all depends on the specific situation of the students, of course, provided that they have adequate documentation to support those claims. I like to say that institutions, right, financial administrators are kind of judge, jury, and executioner of professional judgment because they have sole discretion on granting these cases or not. Now, we'll talk about some of the updates in a couple of slides here, but now all institutions have to maintain a policy of professional judgment, meaning they have to at least hear students out, but they still have sole discretion in if they're going to grant a student a professional judgment case or not. That's the sole choice of them. And of course, documentation, right? In case for compliance, audit reasons, they need to have enough documentation to demonstrate sufficient evidence has been provided to make that sort of change here. So I know that that's going to be required. And talk a little bit more about institutional policies, but they should have more things now on their site, allowing for more transparency for students to know ahead of time, all right, what can I have some sort of idea of what I'm going to have to submit for the situation in which I am requesting. So here's some of the institutional rules and regulations here and sort of updated now for the 24-25 award year. Again, all institutions now have to have a policy surrounding professional judgment. In the past, that was not the case. There were some institutions who just didn't hear professional judgment cases at all. It wasn't a thing. If students had special circumstances or unusual circumstances, it wasn't a policy that they had, thus they didn't hear or, of course, then grant students. Now, at the very least, all institutions are going to be required to have a policy surrounding professional judgment. They are still judge, jury, and executioner of those decisions in granting professional judgment, but at the very least, they're required to sort of hear students out. So the policy has to include who's got the authority to make those decisions regarding appeals, what that internal appeal process looks like at their institution, and then some of the circumstances in which institutions would review a professional judgment case or not, outlining that for students. Professional judgment is not something that's automatic. It's also not award year specific, right? It's quite individual and it could fluctuate depending on the situation. So it's possible students have to complete a specific application or an appeal form that the institution has that they would give to them. They may have to do this on a yearly basis, or maybe they wouldn't. It kind of, again, it all depends on what the institution's policy is and the specific circumstance that's facing the student. They're also going to have their own timeline process, right? From institution to institution, how they kind of get back to students and the timeline in which that all happens is going to vary, right? But when that happens, students have to remember that they need to submit that documentation in a timely manner, meeting those deadlines. Otherwise, they're not going to get their case sort of granted in any sort of regard, right? Have to outline clear reasons for their appeal and provide that adequate documentation. Also, institutions are not obligated to grant professional judgment cases for students if, say, this was conducted and granted at a different institution, right? A student can go to Northern Illinois University, right, and get a dependency override. Now, let's say they transfer, they go to Western. Western's encouraged to accept that documentation and the process that Northern did, right, trying to streamline things with the new guidelines, but they're not required to. They can do their own process, or they can just flat out deny that student if they don't believe adequate documentation or adequate reasoning was given. So here are the two sort of categories now that have been crafted out of professional judgment for the 24-25 award year. Now, instead of just everything being a special circumstances, they've sort of defined them a little bit further. A special circumstance is anything adjusting the data elements in the cost of attendance or in the SAI calculation, right? When I hear special circumstance, I think about money. That's kind of the easiest way to remember it. Unusual circumstances is adjusting a student's dependency status based upon a unique situation. So I hear unusual circumstance, I'm thinking about dependency. Best kind of way to keep those things separated. We'll talk about some examples in a little bit. Again, we talked about schools not being allowed to maintain a policy of just denying them outright. They have to at least hear students out now. And they now have to have a list of required adequate documentation on their website so that students have some kind of idea of what they can expect to be used and submit in making that request. That doesn't mean all of the documentation is going to be on their websites. I was at a conference earlier this spring where I asked this question outright to a lot of administrators, and they said, no, we have some stuff on our website, but I mean, not every single document out there that's possible is going to be on the website. That's kind of impossible. So they at least have a little bit more transparency for students, but of course, they may have other documents they may request. Okay, we'll go ahead. We'll dive now into the appeals process. So this is when a student receives their financial aid package, right? They get their offer letter. Perhaps they believe in their offer letter that it's not enough, right? It doesn't meet their need to go to school, and they then have the option to appeal to the financial aid office, right? So students are going to need to submit documentation requested by the school once they request it, and they'll say, all right, well, what's the reason for it? And then here's the adequate documentation that's going to be required. These appeals are then reviewed by the financial aid office, and they're going to have the option, again, sole discretion, whether to grant an appeal and maybe increase an award or have some kind of dependency override happen. Really depends on that situation. Very important that this appeals process, again, is at the sole kind of institutional regard. It's their kind of show. Students can't come to us at ISAC, or they can't go to the Department of Education and say, I'm making an appeal. This institution's not being fair to me. I have this situation that they won't grant. Not how it works. Again, judge, jury, and executioner lies with the administrators in the financial aid offices. A little more details here on the authority of an aid administrator, right? Regarding the formula for the student aid index and the poverty guideline tables now, in which sort of kind of guides how to package need-based aid, that can't be changed by an administrator, right? That SAI formula is set in stone. It's in statute. So only what the cost of attendance would be at their institution, or maybe a specific value that would be used in the SAI calculation, that can be changed, but the formula itself can't be changed, right? Those data elements have to be adjusted. They have to be related to a student's special circumstance. So if a student is facing a sudden loss in income, for example, for a special reason, right, that wouldn't make sense to change a dependency status if it's talking about money, right? It's got to relate. Whatever the reason is, has to relate to that element in the adjustment. Eligibility requirements. They can't use professional judgment in the appeals process to circumvent the intent of the law or regulation, right? There are federal statutes out there that institutions have to abide by. They also have to keep in mind about the income protection allowance, which is sort of embedded into the formula point I mentioned earlier. That needs to say SAI calculation. I apologize for that. But in the SAI calculation, they do have an income protection allowance to account for modest living expenses. So you may have some students coming to administrators at the time to say, well, look at all my living expenses here. I've got food bills, I've got utilities, I've got my mortgage. And it's like, no, we know that. That's embedded into the application. It's embedded into the formula for calculating need-based aid. So you can't make an adjustment for something that's already part of the formula. And more importantly, they have to be consistent. right? They have to use the resulting SAI calculation consistently for all federal student aid funds awarded to the student. We now know, of course, that the SAI is not going to be the sole thing that calculates a Pell Grant. They now have the federal poverty guideline tables in addition to the SAI, but they have to use that SAI consistently for all federal funds. Common reasons for appeal, we've talked about some of them already. Some additional ones is that the students may look at their offer letters and they don't see the aid on there that they're eligible for, right? Maybe they have other offer letters, they've filled out financial aid applications, they see that they're eligible for MAP and Pell in some regard. Then they get their offer letter from an institution and there's no Pell and no MAP, and they go, what the heck? I know I'm eligible, what's going on here? That would be a reason for an appeal. Perhaps, and this was the case for me in the second point, the student was offered more aid at a similar institution, right? So the students can then provide documentation of the amount of aid that they were offered, whatever it was that was able to kind of fill the gap to meet their financial need, and go to that school and say, listen, so-and-so institution offered me this amount of dollars more, and that really, really helped. I want to go to your institution, but I can't because I need an extra, $5,000 in gift aid, right? X and Y institutions gave this to me. If you could do the same, I can come to your institution. Some schools may entertain that and say, all right, based on this and that, we can give you a little bit more. Great. Some institutions say, no, this is our best offer. We gave you our best offer. Take it or leave it. This was the place, sort of the situation for me. I went to North Central College in Naperville, and I had a similar sort of situation with other institutions, and I was trying to get as much need-based aid as I could because we were broke. I'm trying to go to school and I needed some renewable gift aid for me to make it affordable for me to go to an institution. So thankfully, North Central was able to help me out, up my award a little bit more. And all I had to do was ask, right? I went through the appeals process, reached out and asked. I've always told students, all they can do is say no. You ask, they say no, great. Now you know, but maybe someone would bite. Another reason for appeal is to be more for our current students here. If you have students who are not meeting satisfactory academic progress, right? So these are for current students who have already received financial aid here. They've got their packages. Most of it maybe is renewable. They need that to kind of continue attending. But maybe for a brief period of time, they drop below that satisfactory academic progress, which of course then threatens to take away financial aid, right? A student can appeal for that to say, listen, don't do that. Like, here's the reasons why my grades have dropped. Perhaps there was a sudden death in the family. Maybe there's a divorce going on. You name the situation that could be a special circumstance for students to say, no, here's what's going on, and this is why. And then perhaps institutions can reinstitute that aid, even if they're below satisfactory academic progress. So it just kind of depends. Documentation. We know this is going to require documentation. Whatever that reason is, schools are going to know, all right, well, I need something, otherwise I can't make an adjustment. We know that from federal statute, right? So financial aid officers are going to communicate that with students. They'll let them know exactly what they're asking for, and then some deadlines for when to submit those things. And that's, of course, we know is going to vary depending on the institution. How an institution awards more funds based upon what other institutions offer, that'll vary very much, for example, in terms of what they may ask for documentation and even if they're going to grant that in the first place or not. Again, some institutions are maybe a little bit well off. They have that flexibility, and some don't have that flexibility at all. Other examples of supporting documentation for special circumstances, for example, here, student statements or letters, right? Or letters of in-kind support who can attest to the situation of the family. Maybe you have folks who, students who are fleeing an abusive household, for example. You may have folks close to the family who are aware of the situation. Maybe a layoff notice or a sudden loss of employment, right, from a parent that could lead to a significant loss in income. They may ask for the letter from the former employer verifying so. Divorce, right, another situation where that should lead to a significant loss in income. So they may ask for, the marriage certificate, divorce decree, whatever. Same thing from a death, sudden loss of a parent, the death certificate could be asked. Health reasons, right? These things happen, and healthcare where we are is not cheap. We know that, right? So hospital bills, medical receipts, something like that, where you break a hip and now you're thousands of dollars in medical debt. That is a significant increase in expense. Or for other reasons, right? Court records, police reports, right? if you're victims of human trafficking or fleeing abusive household, that there's some kind of process in the legal system. Those are great examples of supporting documentations that could verify what's happening with the student's situation, and financial aid offices will ask for those. So here is some additional special circumstance appeals here, right? For some common other reasons here. So we talked about loss of income, but a change in household size is another reason we didn't mention on previous slides as well. Perhaps what they would be, maybe who's been claimed on the tax is an example of what they could ask for, perhaps a bill proving who's in the household, sometimes even in-kind statements, just a signed written statement by the student and the family about exactly who's in the household, their age, and the relationship to the student is commonly been asked. And then the bottom point I mentioned too is a new one, is about students who have dependents, right? If students, have a new child and maybe they're together with someone, they have a baby, right? They have increased childcare costs. Similarly to how they would work with the medical expenses, right? An additional large expense that would be, of course, potentially a common special circumstance reason, and there would be documentation to support that. Like, here's the baby, here's all the costs associated with that, and they can verify that. What are some instances and some examples then of wouldn't qualify for appeal here? What would not be in a special circumstance? Think about some of maybe the reasons why it would be unacceptable, why a parent would be unacceptable reasons to not providing their information on the FAFSA, for example, right? Parents were just unwilling for whatever reason, right? I don't trust the government. I'm not putting my name on the form. Done. Like, whatever. Parents saying, great, I don't want to do this because I'm not paying for my students' cost of education. That's their responsibility. And we know just because parents put their information on the FAFSA does not mean that they're responsible for actually paying for the student's education. That's on the responsibility of the student. You may hear parents say, I don't claim my kid on my taxes. There's no reason for me to be on the form. Not true, right? That has nothing to do. Whoever claims who on what taxes has no bearing in terms of financial aid, the applications. Perhaps students are financially and physically independent from parents. You may hear that a lot. Again, we know for the sole purposes of financial aid, you're typically a dependent student if you're under the age of 24, right? You may have students who are 18, 19, but they live on their own. They don't live under the roof of mom and dad. That doesn't mean that they're independent solely. So that's a common situation that kind of comes up. And they may request that because, all right, like I need that dependency override. We know that's not a legit reason. So let's talk about some other examples of the unusual circumstances then. This is about dependency, right? Students leaving home to an abusive family environment, perhaps are victims of human trafficking. That is a legitimate reason to not provide parental information on the form. Or maybe students just don't know where their parents are. There's no way to locate them. I've dealt with situations before where I've got students coming to me and maybe their parents aren't here in the United States, but maybe they have parents elsewhere in the world, but they know where they are. They have contact with them. Everything's okay. There's no abuse going on. Like, that's different than just, I don't know where my parents are at all. Like, I've got zero contact with them. That's an unusual circumstance. Or parents are incarcerated. That'd be an acceptable reason to not provide parental information on the form, thus is an unusual circumstance. So a variety of those examples, the following bullet points would be examples of that documentation that an institution might request. Written statements and letters of support from counselors, family members, neighbors, law enforcement and court reports, right, documenting that there's been some kind of legal action for, the family abusive environment, or that parents are incarcerated, right? Interviews between the student and the financial aid administrator can count as well. Or, this is new for the 24-25 award year, documented determination made by another institution, right, and that administrator for the same or prior award year. They're trying to streamline the dependency override process a little bit for administrators by saying, hey, listen, if Northern Illinois did this for the student their freshman year, you, when they transferred the sophomore year at, say, Eastern Illinois University, can just accept that process, right? Got that documentation, you see that they did the process, you can just go ahead and renew it over to your institution. That way the student doesn't have to do it every single time, every single year. They can just kind of carry over, trying to streamline things a little bit easier. Now, that's not a requirement, though, by chance. They're encouraged to do so. Institutions have the option to just say, no, we're not granting that at all. Or saying, we'll hear you out, of course, but we're going to do our own processes. It's a little bit different than, say, Northerns. We want X documentation. We want to see it. Whatever, again, is that their sole discretion. So how do we support our students who are trying to seek an appeal? Some advice maybe, right? Encourage students to reach out to their financial aid offices as soon as possible to inquire about their specific situation. Given this year with all the delays, this is going to be hard, and I'm sure institutions are going to be flexible for the variety of reasons I mentioned earlier. But especially maybe even in more normal time here, as soon as I do this, the better. What could be considered a special circumstance at one institution may not be the same at another. So getting that information as soon as possible so that they can make an informed decision about where they want to go is key. Try to assist students in gathering that supporting documentation. This could be hard for them. Finding out where these things are and how to fill out the forms, specifically for our first-gen students, could be a nightmare. So reminding them to keep all those supporting documents in order, making sure that they're meeting their deadlines, giving them actual guidance on what questions mean for them. This appeals process does not happen necessarily overnight. It could take some time, right? So they want to prepare for that and have them be ready. Also remember, you as a college access professional, right? If you're not an administrator on the call, remember that that's the case. You're not a financial aid administrator. So you want to always refer students to the financial aid office who is judge, jury, and executioner about rules and regulations regarding administering financial aid, what their specific appeals process is, who to report to, etc. Again, that will all vary by institution. We talked a little bit about this first point here, but we know that institutions are going to handle this all differently, right? They're going to have documentation about any sort of reason for the appeal. They may have different types of documents too, whether it's all one for special and unusual, or they may have different documents for special circumstances and unusual circumstances in terms of like an application or some kind of starting appeal form, right? Going to make sure you have to check out the website. You get in contact with the financial aid office. They'll be able to guide students the best they can. Again, this is going to take time. I mentioned this on the last slide, but following up with financial aid offices is never a bad thing. Getting estimated timelines and deadlines from them is going to be key to keep everything in track so that they have the information needed to make a timely decision. Schools are always going to be required to resolve conflicting information prior to dispersing their financial aid as well. So they may see something on the financial aid application that maybe doesn't match what has been submitted then via, tax return information if they had to do manual inputting of that information on the application, or perhaps some kind of unusual circumstance where they're granting a dependency override, but they're getting different information from a couple of sources regarding the family situation here. Schools by law are required to resolve that, and they will ask for lots of documentation to get the truth and the verified information of the student's situation here. They're going to have that final ruling for the appeals requests. Remember that us at ISAC and the Department of Ed cannot make those appeals. We do not hear those processes. It's not our responsibility. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and dive into some general resources for all of us to be aware of here. Just some helpful tips to start off with. Support your students throughout the appeals process, right? Walk them through the stuff I've talked with you today, but also try and let them handle their communication, right? Encourage some self-advocacy on their part. They're getting older here, making phone calls, which I know students can be terribly frightened of. As a young person myself, I understand that fear a little bit. We're so virtual with texting and email. Try to have them handle the communication, but of course, give them that support. Their financial aid offices are not going to want to talk to teachers or counselors or whoever. They're going to want to talk to the students, so it's important that they do that. Try to remind students that they're also not negotiating, but they're appealing. And I know that could be framed a little bit differently when I talk about, well, one institution offered me this and you didn't. Can you match it? It's like, that could sound like a negotiation, but no, there's a reason for it, right? It's because you're a need-based student, because you've demonstrated need. There could be specific reasons for that. You want to make sure that you're getting all the aid eligible for, and that's why you're appealing. I also want to encourage students to stay proactive and patient. Specifically with all the processing delays going on right now, I know how frustrating it is for our students and families in which we work with. It's been very hard for all of us involved in the college voting process. So keep at them, try to keep them organized and proactive, but understand that patience is going to be required here. Decisions for these appeal processes are going to take time, and that's going to be exacerbated by all the issues with the new FAFSA cycle this year. I want to turn your attention to a good resource in if you're working with students trying to craft official appeals letters to send to financial aid offices. It's a resource called Swift Student. It's by an organization called Form Student, and it is a free resource to help students write their appeal letters for free. So it guides students through the entire letter, and I've done this myself, and I've walked this through even our core members when we train them throughout the year, to just have them fill in the blanks of the templates for the specific reason in which they're trying to appeal, right? It has them input just their name, their date, fill in the blank for this sentence about your reason, attach supporting documentation, attach signed letter statements here, references. It walks them through the entire letter step by steps and really makes it nice and thorough for them. And then it gives them options even to submit that letter to the financial aid office right on the platform, usually attached in a PDF copy of an email, typically how financial aid offices are requesting these documents in the first place here. So it'll all vary in terms of what documents it's going to have them prompted to attach and do, as well as eligibility, but that'll kind of vary on the appeal type. When you go to the site, it has the variety of appeal types on there for students so that it's crafted nicely, whether it's an unusual circumstance, a special circumstance. It's written based upon that specific situation. Here's the website. Just want to go ahead and throw that out there so you know what it looks like here at formswift.com/swiftstudent here. So you can see here, it kind of walks them through exactly how to request this and how to go through the appeals, indicating eligibility criteria, right? Meaning the acceptable reasons that I've shared with you today, right? Like abusive family environment, parents are incarcerated. It'll walk through all of those things. And then based upon those reasons, what kind of documentation the student would need. Go ahead, and then how do I write the appeal letter? It gives them the templates, and it can walk them through step by step how to do it. I'll highlight our FAFSA communication toolkit as well, changing gears a little bit here. But because of all of sort of the delays in the new FAFSA, we know that application numbers are down. So communicating to all of our students and our families about financial aid applications has been key. So we've created this toolkit regarding the times here to hopefully help assist our practitioners and our college-going access professionals about different sorts of templates to use when you're trying to host events for your families, whether it's robocalls, email script, advertisements, social media posts, all of those things. Nice big templates to use if you're having trouble kind of getting those resources together and sending those out. I also want to highlight our GAP Access portal here and our Financial Aid Completion Initiative. GAP Access is live and now fully functional. That was delayed as well because we were waiting on some federal data to come in so that we can match the rosters and the completion numbers properly. But that's all good now. So if you're a counselor, principal, whatever, you have access to GAP, that should be fully functional now. You'll be able to see if a high school student completed a FAFSA, an alternative application, or the opt-out waiver, which is now online and we get automatically uploaded to GAP Access here. If you're a public institution, these rosters have been uploaded already, right? We get those from the State Board of Education. If you're a private institution, you'll still have to upload those yourself. Also want to highlight our PACE Symposium as well. We did have one earlier this month in April down in Champaign at the I Hotel. It was a great event, and we like to be hosting these now twice a year, so that is the same case this year. We do have our final one here May 8th at Elgin Community College. Registration is still open for the event. We have plenty of spots available. Would love to see you come out to Elgin Community College to learn more about how other schools are implementing the PACE framework, whether it's the state's framework or a customized framework, best practices and tips about implementation and what other schools are doing, getting more ideas about how to better meet your benchmarks. This is what the symposium is for. So highly recommend checking this out if you're involved in any point in implementing PACE. Our First Generation Scholars Network is also sort of a new program the last couple of years here. We're trying to kind of encourage our first-gen students to keep going and also offer them the support that they need, creating a statewide network of first-gen colleagues like themselves. We also connect them with a first-gen mentor here, someone from permanent staff here at ISAC. And we can also connect them to a first-gen program on a campus, right? For example, I went to North Central College in Naperville, like I mentioned, and they have the best first-gen program maybe in the country. I mean, it is very thorough, and big, and it's such a great program for first-gen students. It gave me academic, emotional, and financial support. I got a scholarship every year, and other two institutions across our state are creating these programs to help support their first-gen students here. So if we can connect them to a program and a campus like that for them, perhaps that can alter their decision about where they want to go. We also have free sort of check-in events across the state for these first-gen students that we've been kind of hosting throughout. So have them join the network. Click here, it's free if you do work with first-gen students. I also want to highlight our PACE framework survey. Sort of a brand thing, little new thing here that we're trying to implement across the state here, to have all of our institutions take the survey to gain insight about the current whereabouts of where they are in the PACE process. Whether you have a school who has got their own framework, district-wide framework, regional framework, we want to know what's going on in your institution so that we can keep accurate data. So this is a survey that's going to be open throughout the month of May. You can see the deadline there. If you have questions on it, you can shoot us an email. We have the link there at the bottom of your screen, the Survey Monkey. It's going to be on our website. Scan the QR code. It takes you right there, just so we can learn about the current whereabouts of what's going on with PACE in your institutions here. If you haven't sent your PACE framework to us already and you'd like to, we'd love to receive it. We post those on our website to give other institutions a chance to see what are other schools doing, and could we gain some ideas from looking at some examples here about how to organize and decorate and everything about a customized framework. So please fill out the survey if you can. And then last but not least, our CE and PD hours here. If you can provide your feedback for today's session by completing that evaluation, you'll be able to request your CE and PD hours there. This is going to close in about 48 hours. We do Thursday, April 25th, close of business, which is about 4:30 p.m. for us. If you are specifically requesting PD hours, please make sure you include your Illinois Educator Identification Number. If we don't see your EIN number in the evaluation, we're not allowed to award you PD hours. So please make sure you input that there. We'll follow up with those completed forms with you in a couple of weeks. It takes us about a week or two, depending on how busy we are. We don't have an automated system here at the state. We have to kind of do this manually. So sometimes it takes us a little bit of time, but we will definitely follow up with those completed forms for you. Again, bottom right-hand corner of your screen, chat, that's where you'll find the evaluation. Go ahead and click on that. It'll pop up, and then you can click on the link. And that is all we have for you today. Hopefully this was a nice kind of overview of everything appeals and professional judgment. If you have questions throughout the rest of this financial aid cycle going into the summer, please do not hesitate to contact us at isac.outreach@illinois.gov. We'll be happy to assist you in any way we can. Hope you enjoy. Take care. Thanks a lot.